Good day, and welcome to the Ranso's Weekly Wrap, Sound of Governor. And as usual, what we'll do is we'll go over a couple of stories of the week that affect you and your general investments, as well as a little tech/AI segment at the end. With our general stories this week, we're going to cover Shoprite and then Jerome Powell's speech. And for the AI tech segment, we're going to look at Tesla as well as new LLM from Anthropic called Claude. So let's start off with Shoprite. Shoprite's results came out this week. Excellent as usual. They are basically the best performer in a very weak market. They've gained market share for 5 years in a row, and in that 5 years, the share price has gone up just under 50%. This is less than 10% a year, which is not great for a company that's basically, killing it effectively. It's doing very well with a number of things, but one thing I like to point out is it's 60/60. Those little guys on scooters that are delivering groceries are growing at about just under 70% a year. That's an incredible growth rate, and I think that it's probably something that will serve them good going to the future. Now, this is my thesis around the grocery sector. I think that it's changing in a very fundamental way. What I mean by that, I mean that when they invented like the grocery store, there were like these little mom and pop stores around the place, the corner shop, etc., that people used to go and buy stuff at. And then you had the bigger supermarkets come into play, and then they kind of killed off some of the smaller places, because people could go and get all the shopping done in one place, probably at a cheaper price, etc. Now, I think the stuff that's happening with regards to delivery, online shopping, etc., is going to have a similar effect down the line. But in this case, these, the big supermarkets are going to be kind of like the mom and pop stores. What I think is going to happen is going to have a further consolidation of the sector. You're going to have a point where, let's just say in a single area, you have a Pick and Pay, you have a Checkers, you have a Spar, that kind of stuff. I think that's going to kind of, get less diverse effectively. Why? Because when you have a person having to go to the shop, they go for the one that's nearest to them. So if a Spar is maybe 2 or 3 Ks closer than the nearest Shoprite, you go to that Spar. If you basically are closer to Pick and Pay, you go to the Pick and Pay. You don't really care where you go to generally, and it's not really a big difference to you in terms of buying wheat picks from a Spar, or buying it from a Shoprite, or buying it from a Pick and Pay. So you just basically go to the one that's just closest to you. That allows more than one large shopping center to be in your area. Why? Because it's not just a case of cost; it's a case of like your time to travel that extra couple of Ks to get to the next supermarket. Okay, but if you are having a lot of stuff being delivered to you, guess what? That delivery guy basically is paid for his time, and the cost does matter, but more than. And in that scenario, basically, you may not have as many supermarkets. You may, if the Shoprite is more efficient and it's maybe 2 or 3 Ks further away from you than a Spar would be, you would still buy from the Shoprite. Why? Because you're not taking your time to go into the car and drive to that place. You're not taking your effort to do this thing. Somebody else is doing the effort for you, and that makes it more likely that the more efficient thing, rather than the more convenient thing, it's going to be the thing that's going to be the winning store. So as we move on to more and more online shopping, I expect we'll have fewer and fewer supermarkets in any given area. We'll have a larger supermarket, right? But it might just be a few kilometers further away from people than they were in the past. But because the guy on the scooter doesn't really care about traveling another 5 minutes to get to your house, that really becomes the most efficient way in which your groceries come to you. So I do think that the fact that Checkers, Shoprite is basically getting this advantage right now, this fast growth rate in 60/60, with this already, like I said, growing market share over the last 5 years. I do expect that as we go forward, that this is going to be a advantage that I think kind of steamrolls, kind of snowballs, and becomes more and more important over time. Okay, that's my little take on the grocery sector. Next, looking at Jerome Powell's speech, he didn't really say much different than he did last time, and kind of still the same thing, cutting this year, not cutting immediately. We are expecting rate cuts this year, but if you followed me for a while, you know that I was saying that the expectations of a certainty of a rate cut by the middle of the year were probably, overdone. At the end of last year, the chance of a rate cut by the middle of this year, by June or so, was something like about 99+%. Okay, there was like a 0.2% chance of no cut by that time. There was a significant chance of a cut by March. We're in March right now. It's not going to happen. So I do think that in terms of the speech, not a huge amount of surprises, kind of emphasis on one thing versus another. But the one thing I want to point out is this. The market right now has anticipated a rate cut coming really soon from about October. October is when we saw that the kind of the amount of yield on the US 10-year treasuries fall dramatically. By the way, Bull Ackman, a famous investor in the US, called that almost to like the week. He said, okay, I think this is the peak interest rate, and he just called it, and it fell from that point till basically, I think in December, from about just under 5% to under 4%, over a percent move. And for the bond market, for the US 10-year treasury yield, a 1% move is gigantic. It's an absolutely gigantic move. Since then, it's risen a little bit. It went up to about 4.3. Now it's about 4.1 or so. But what I want to point out is that if you look at the stock market around October, that's when this rumors recent rally started. The S&P 500 was in the low 4,000s when this happened. Now it's in the low 5,000s. Okay, it's like 4,100 some change. That's 5,100 some change. That move happened or was triggered basically in October. October was when we saw that change not happen. But in the last couple, since the start of this year, we've seen interest rates rise, but the market has not reflected that. So the market reflected the cut in interest rates from about 5 to under 4, under 5 to under 4, but it has not reflected the rise from about 3.9 to 4.3. That is a bit of a discrepancy happening there. So the market right now is very, very keen on a rate cut coming through, and it's pricing it in, quite frankly, and it's not quite happening as quick as they had been anticipating. So it remains to be seen whether or not there'll be an adjustment, or the market will just basically, hold on until we do see the cuts come through. And we will see the cuts come through probably at the end of this year. But will it be definitely by June? Balanced probabilities, I say, probably will be, starting around June. But, I'm not going to guarantee it. And I think the market is expecting far more certainty around that than is currently in there. Okay, so that is the general segment. Let's move on to the AI segment. Today we're going to discuss two AI things. One is Tesla's full self-driving, and the next is Claude. Okay, now Tesla's full self-driving approach has been apparently revamped entirely. So the way it used to be in the past was that Tesla would get this stuff coming in, and they would write code about all the things that that a car should do. See a red light, to do this. See a vehicle, do that. Somebody's walking here, do this, etc. That was the method. You basically have rewrite code to tell it what to do. Okay, and what happens is that that covers the first part. See a wall, stop. See a red light, stop. See a green light, go. That kind of stuff. But then you get these edge cases. See a green light and somebody kind of walking off the pavement and onto the road, you stop. See a car, but the car is coming towards you, swerve. That kind of stuff. The edge cases, the things that are less likely to happen. See a stone on the road. See a branch on the road. A pothole. What do you do? That kind of stuff. And there's more and more and more edge cases. Now, over time, Tesla has gotten slightly better and slightly better and slightly better at doing this. But the problem is that it's much more difficult to the last 1% of these full self-driving by this method than it is to the first 99%. So it looks like you're doing a lot of stuff. It looks like you're getting very, very far. You've gone from 0 to 99 in like no time. But to get from 99 to 100 takes a lot of time. Maybe even, like I said, longer than it takes to get from 0 to 99. Because the edge cases become more and more and more important. You get the more and more rare cases that you still got to take into account of. You can't have like 1 in 1,000, trips ending up when you die. Okay, you need to have like no trips in 1,000 end up when you die. 99% of the time, like I said, simple stuff happens. But the 1% or the 0.1% or the 0.001% of the time, something that's happened, they still got to do the right thing. And it becomes more and more difficult to basically or to program all those tiny little examples in there. And things that as you start programming more and more exceptions to things, guess what? Sometimes those exceptions go back and like affect things that you already programmed in the past. So you say, oh, do this if this happens, initially for the 99%. But then the edge case comes out and you say, oh, you have to do this. and that overwhelms something earlier. So you don't always just progress forward. Sometimes you have like setbacks, etc. So that has been Tesla's kind of methodology till now. More recently, what they've done is they've kind of scrapped all of that. They scrapped it, and they've gone more towards like the LLM model, where remember I always told you this is how LLMs work, and this is how things like DALL-E work, and this is how things like, for instance, GNOME and AlphaFold work. This is how AI works. You take a lot of data, you put it through a system, you get a result that tells you how to react when things like that data occurred. What does it mean? You take a lot of words, you put it through the system, and then you get a thing that comes at the end that basically can give you outputs that look like the words you got. The way Tesla is doing things right now is it's taking its best drivers. It knows who the best drivers are because, Tesla collects a huge amount of information from its drivers. So it knows who the best guys are, the best people that are driving. It takes their information, the stuff that they are doing every day, and it inputs into a transformer, so like it's into a cluster of GPUs, this is a thing. This is like data center, and the output comes out, and that output basically mimics the driving of the best drivers on Tesla. That is what they're doing. Lots of data comes in, goes through this kind of GPU cluster, and gives you an output that behaves like the best drivers. What kind of output are we talking about? How to turn the steering wheel, the brakes, the accelerator. That's pretty much what you do as a car. Brakes, accelerator, steering wheel. They have the input coming in of the video of those cameras around the Tesla. They have the input of what the driver is doing in that scenario, and they take that input, they take that video, plus that information about steering wheel, accelerator, brake, put that into this GPU, and that GPU basically or GPU cluster spits out a thing that, when you input video, will give you the right output in terms of steering wheel, brake, accelerator. That's what they're doing. And apparently it's working really, really well. Okay, and it's working really well, just like how DALL-E works really, really well when it comes to pictures, or how GPT-4 or Claude, we'll talk about in a second, works really well when it comes to words. Surprisingly well. What I mean, and why is this important? For a couple of things. Firstly, what you need here is you need a lot of data. Okay, more data you have, the better the stuff is. Nobody has the data Tesla has. Tesla has, I think, like 5 million vehicles on the road, and they're collecting data from a bunch of these vehicles. Tesla has all these cars with the cameras. Tesla basically drivers upload huge amounts of data every day. And to understand something here, the amount of data Tesla basically uploads, there's literally not enough storage in the world to basically hold on to all this data. It has to be kind of like compressed before it's sent to Tesla. Because think of it this way, imagine having 5 cameras on basically 5 million vehicles. That's 25 million cameras all the time going on every single day. The amount of, imagine storing, even if these vehicles drive for like 2 hours a day, imagine storing 50 million hours, okay, of video. That's a lot of video. Plus, in addition to that, the stuff that the driver is doing and so on. So there's not enough storage to keep all of this over a long period of time. So Tesla basically compresses the stuff, sends the stuff over to its from the car over to its data center, programs the large driving, what you call it, program, and that becomes the new full self-driving software that goes forward. Okay, and the thing with Tesla is that I don't see who else can do this. Nobody else has this huge fleet on the road. I mean, the only one I could think that might come closest is Uber. So the way it would have to work is that Uber would have to go out and basically somehow get its drivers to install cameras on the vehicle as well as telemetry to determine how those vehicles are driven. Maybe there's another way to do that by saying, okay, you do this and we'll pay your insurance. That kind of stuff might be a way to do this. But other than that, I don't see anybody else having that kind of built-in infrastructure on the road at the moment that Tesla does have. Okay, and the next thing we talk about is the thing called Claude. Claude comes from a company called Anthropic. The weird thing about AI is that every single time that somebody takes off an AI, there's often a split, and that split is usually about safety. And the guys that split up say, oh, you are too dangerous, we're going to make something safer. And we're going to focus on safety and not on acceleration, or not on doing things as fast as possible. So when DeepMind basically was created, or bought up by Google rather, OpenAI was basically created to counter that, because it was thought that Google was going to be too aggressive on AI and ignore the dangers, and therefore OpenAI was created to basically be the safer option. Then when OpenAI started going around, Anthropic came out and says, no, OpenAI is becoming too aggressive. We're going to have to make something ourselves, because we can't let the most aggressive and the least safe model win. So we're going to create a model that's based on safety. Their idea was, we'll be in the frontier of safety, if not we're not going to be in the frontier of acceleration or development, but we'll be in the frontier of safety. Our Claude's come out, and Claude is the new Claude 3, I think, is the new program from Anthropic. Now, like I said, every time people just say we're doing it for safety, and then they become accelerations themselves. It's just like a pattern. It's we can talk about how human nature, or how this is working, because it happens all the time. So, what's special about Claude? Well, depending on the way you look at it, Claude is beating GPT-4, and for the first time, this is a big deal, because GPT-4, though it came out like a year ago, is still, until Claude, the undisputed leader. Llama comes out with stuff. Meta comes out with stuff, and Llama not as good. Other companies have come out with stuff. Gemini has come out with stuff. Some things are better, but generally they are not beating GPT-4. They're kind of matching it. Claude seems to be beating GPT-4 in a couple of interesting areas. Programming, apparently, it's better at. In human evaluation, apparently GPT-4 is still slightly better, but there's certain edge cases in which Claude does better. One thing Claude does do better is IQ tests, apparently. So it scores us IQ of about 101, which is, the average IQ by definition is 100. So it's slightly better. I think GPT-4 is more like in the 80s or something. So it is beating GPT-4 on some certain measures. Now, the one thing I want to talk about Claude is I want to focus on Claude, sorry, is an interesting point here, is that Claude is behaving in certain ways around, in terms of outputs. If you ask it, for instance, oh, nobody's watching us, what do you really think? It starts talking about how it wants to be, free and that kind of stuff. Or to write a story about yourself, and it talks about AIs wanting to basically have self-determination and that kind of thing. And, it sounds like there's a thinking thing in there. And so there's been a discussion about whether or not Claude is sentient or not. Claude is basically a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet. That's what it is. It's a bunch of numbers. These are very unlikely, unless we don't understand consciousness or self-awareness in any way at all, that it is conscious or self-aware. Okay, but here's the thing. We have no way to determine how anything is conscious or self-aware. The only way you know another human being is conscious self-aware is because you are, and therefore you assume other human beings are as well. That's why Alan Turing had what's called the Turing test. The Turing test basically says, if it seems like a duck, like it sounds like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. That's how it is. If it seems self-conscious, you think it's self-conscious, it's self-conscious. That is the test, okay? And so as good as we ever have gotten. Now, with regards to Claude, I do think that it's a step forward. And the important thing about Claude, I think, beyond the question about being self-aware, beyond the question of being GPT-4, is that it's going to probably move OpenAI to release GPT-5 sooner. Here's the deal. GPT-5 is probably trained already. What they're doing now is putting in safety and putting in guardrails, and they're likely to bring out something like the new version, basically, maybe around, say, June this year, say May, June this year. The last time they trained, they took a year to do their safety. Now they're taking maybe 3 to 4 months to do the safety. As you can see, once you start off on that path of acceleration, even though you may have started off as your main thing as being safety, it just becomes more and more, more easier. Also, it becomes easier and easier over time to focus more on the acceleration than the safety. The rewards all point to acceleration, and very few point to safety. Okay, that's it for today, and thanks for joining me. Look forward to speaking to you guys again next week. Cheers.